Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to a Call It What You Want emergency podcast. As I'm sure you've all seen the news, Gregg Berhalter has been let go from his duties with the U.S. men's national team. And so here we are to talk about what that means. And Tony, your first thoughts once this news was released.
First off, what's up, bud? Yeah, look, I'm not surprised, right? I think we kind of were expecting this over the last couple days. We thought, well, we didn't know when it was going to happen, but we thought it was going to happen, and there's been a lot of pressure in and around U.S. soccer about this hiring, and I think ultimately, the end of the day, results were the deciding factor on Gregg Berhalter's fate and the direction of the group right now. And you and I and Brian McBride and Jimmy Conrad have talked about it quite a bit. It's not necessarily what happened before, but what's happened over this second period, I'll call it, right? The second phase of Gregg Berhalter's reign at the U.S. men's national team. So now the search is on for a new manager, and it's a really important hire. And I know we'll get into it, but this becomes now, again, I feel like Charlie was saying, the most important period in U.S. soccer history for the men's side.
Are you surprised at all? Because I know there are a lot of people who thought that U.S. Soccer / Matt Crocker with this first hire may not make that decision. May say, you know what, this is my first hire. I'm gonna ride with Gregg Berhalter because there have been some pauses predating Matt Crocker that he felt, man, the squad really wants to play for him, that he's not ready to make that decision just yet. But are you relieved? Are you surprised? Are you thinking that Matt Crocker has done his job and this is why U.S. Soccer hired him in the first place? Oh, you're muted, Tony. Welcome back to Call It What You Want. We are live on Galazzo Network as well as YouTube. So once Galazzo Network show ends, hop on YouTube because the live chat is fire. We just got news that the U.S. men's national team have relieved Gregg Berhalter from his duties as head coach. And so I want to take this time to first acknowledge what Gregg Berhalter did, because I don't think he has been treated all that fairly in terms of earning respect from, I think, the country, in terms of taking a national team from a fresh scratch start after they failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup, an inexperienced young team with, yes, loads of potential, but zero experience, and getting them through World Cup qualifying, getting them to the World Cup, and then getting them out of the World Cup, along with converting over some dual nationals that are extremely important for our development and I think for our progress in the international game. So first and foremost, I want to pay my respect, and I think we should all respect what he's done for the country first and foremost. But Tony, we touched on the news has come out. Were you surprised by this decision?
Before I get to that, I want to echo your words, Charlie. Right? Yeah, we should look. Gregg Berhalter has been a soldier for our country with regards to U.S. soccer. This guy played in the World Cup. No doubt didn't want this to go down this way, and I'm sure gave everything for the group. And I think we agree, and he probably agrees. It's time to move on here. But I'm glad you started off with that. With regards to being surprised, no, not surprised. I think we kind of felt this pressure mounting. There was certainly an outcry from the fans. We saw two supporters groups put out their statements, which is really unheralded in a lot of ways, right? Especially the number one supporters group who gets a lot of help from U.S. soccer, and good on them for voicing their opinion. But I think ultimately the decision wasn't made based on fan reaction. I think ultimately, and I'd like to believe ultimately, it was made on the fact that this team was going in the wrong direction.
You're right. I mean, if you had a checklist for the U.S. men's national team head coach, and the criterias were results, performance, and let's say the team dynamic, right? The chemistry within the locker room, right? And how the players feel about the coach and how the fans maybe feel about the coach. And so if you're doing a checklist, it's an X, it's a failure on the results, and it's a results-driven business. I get that. So let's go down to the performance. He was extremely unlucky, and the team played incredible and played Uruguay off the pitch and then Panama off the pitch, and wow. It was also an X. It was a failure, especially when you're talking about the Colombia friendly and Nations League against Jamaica. Just not enough convincing performances to say, you know what, we are going in the right direction, like you alluded to, Tony. And then the third one is the team dynamic. Yes, the harmony was there. The players loved each other. That's great. And they also felt that for the coach. That's great. But if you don't have 1 and 2, 3 is irrelevant, right? So I think that's where we're at. But let's welcome in one of the most esteemed journalists in the state, in the country, and Paul Tenorio. Paul Tenorio, come join us, man.
What's up, guys?
How we doing? I know you're always at the forefront of these massive news breaks. You're fantastic at your research. So walk us through what transpired today.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys touched on some of it. I mean, this wasn't really a surprise after the way the results went in the Copa América, and I think even if we look before that, when you go back to when Gregg Berhalter took the program over again in June, he didn't coach in the Gold Cup, but we had the loss in Trinidad and Nations League. You know, the last gasp goal that was needed against Jamaica in Nations League to get through to the final. The loss to Germany in the friendly. The loss to Colombia 5-1 in a friendly. And then, of course, going out in the group stage in the Copa América, it was adding up. It felt like there wasn't progress being made on the field. And ultimately, you know, when I spoke with Matt Crocker with a small group of reporters earlier tonight when the news was coming out, that's what he said. You know, I said, what is the reason why he's not the voice to lead this program forward anymore? And he said, you know, this group made a lot of progress. A very, very young group made a lot of progress. But we need to take that progress and we need to turn it into results now. And the results weren't coming for the U.S. men's national team, and ultimately that's why Matt Crocker made this decision.
Tony, I know you have a couple of questions to ask, but I'll jump in front of you. If you're looking at this from a USSF perspective, what were some of those conversations in terms of, was this a unanimous decision? Was this a split decision? Because for me, Gregg Berhalter is well-liked. I think everyone respects him. But at the same time, I think the writing was on the wall when you're talking about wins versus top 20 teams in the world, when you're talking about performances that inspire a country, especially ahead of a 2026 World Cup. How did everyone feel about Gregg Berhalter's job on the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it falls on Matt Crocker, right? This was his hire to bring Gregg Berhalter back, and I think it was up to him to make the decision on what to do moving forward. If you're going to hire a sporting director, this is the most important part of his job because the senior national teams are the most visible part of the U.S. soccer program. Yes, you have extended national teams and you have the youth national teams, but the men's and women's senior national teams and what they do on these stages is the most visible part of U.S. soccer, and especially ahead of a home World Cup. It's going to be unprecedented. I mean, Tony played in 1994. It is still the biggest World Cup that was ever staged, and this one is going to be even bigger. And so you need to be able to feel like you have the right amount of momentum going forward, excitement. You need to try to inspire people. And it's more than just what you do on the field, but that's a big part of it. Matt Crocker said, you know, he did this the same way he did with Vlatko Andonovski after the Women's World Cup. He took time, gave the coach a couple days to decompress, and then went through a full review of the tournament with Gregg Berhalter, you know, top to bottom on kind of what went right, what went wrong, reviewing the program overall, going back before the Copa América and the progress that was being made going into the tournament. And then ultimately he had to make a decision, and Crocker felt the right choice was to move on from Gregg Berhalter. And we'll see if he's right. I mean, now the critical part is who comes next. And to your guys' point, I think when we talk about the Berhalter era, the fans are incredibly harsh. Social media is not pretty. I don't like to wade into the comment sections of the stories I write because you can't really have too much of a rational conversation. I think that when we look at the performances in the last World Cup specifically, I thought they were very positive for a young group. I think holistically, when you look at the big picture, there was a lot done with this pool to move it forward. But ultimately, this cycle was about growth. It's about turning a young team into a team that can, as Gregg Berhalter said, change the soccer in America forever. This team wasn't doing that right now.
Paul, look, when you look at this group, we were just talking here, and of course, I'm in the CBS studios right now, so everyone's kind of buzzing around this place, right? And there's a million different things going on, and everyone's questioning, where do we go next? What do we do with these players? Like, everyone's got questions, and I said, the next coach who comes in, and it's we don't know who it's going to be. They tell us already, as you mentioned, they have a search going on already. If the next coach comes in here, whoever it is, and has one thing that they want to implement, and that's, hey, all of our players need to be playing at their club team. What happens to this group? Because I said this immediately after the Netherlands loss when we went on air on my radio show, and I said, by 2026, the one thing we have to do, Paul, is we have to have players playing week in and week out at the club level. This national team could look completely different, and any other coach is going to have a different eye as well.
Tony, it's not going to look different because guess what? The players aren't going to Chelsea or Milan, or guess what? They're going back to the Fulhams of the world. They're going back to the Rennes of the world. We're not seeing all these Americans playing at the biggest clubs and just happy to be there and competing and maybe being a role player. We're going to see a lot of players going back to the clubs that we were all playing on because those were the clubs that you're guaranteed more minutes, more playing time.
That's my point. Yeah, that's where I was getting to. You're exactly right.
I think it's less about a mandate, right? That you have to be playing in terms of having to say it. I think it's crucial that the next coach comes in and says, you're not guaranteed a spot. Okay. I don't care what your profile is. I don't care how big of a star you think you are. You have to earn your right to be on the field. And a part of that is, like you guys are both saying, are you playing consistently at your club? And I do think that there was a little bit of complacency that started to occur in this team where people just believed that A, they belong on this team no matter what, and B, they belong on the field. And when you start to lose some of that jeopardy, right? Some of that idea that, hey, I might not be able to play for the national team if I don't find a way onto the field. I might not be able to start if I don't get fit. I think that's when you lose some of the competitiveness within the group, because it sends messages up and down the roster. And so I think just by starting to kind of create that competition again, that belief there are no favorites, you're not guaranteed a spot to play. I'll put you on the bench. I don't care how big you think your name is. Like, I think that will go a long way. And I do think a criteria should be, are you playing consistently at your club? If you are, Tanner Tessman and you're starting every single game in Serie A this year, you should have just as good of a chance to start as Weston McKennie or Tyler Adams, and especially if they're not playing at their club. So I think we do need to see an evolution of the team in that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of holding players responsible and accountable for the playing time to get called into camp, like it's always been for the most part, except for the few exceptions. If you're playing at Real Madrid or Barcelona or these big clubs, Milan to a certain extent, if they're competing on all fronts, sure. But I want to take a second to welcome in one of the OGs, Jimmy Conrad, who's trying to do his thing with Fox. Now he's locked up in some old camera room in Fox Studios. Listen, but welcome back.
At least I'm not in my kid's bedroom, Chuck. Okay, so we got that going for us. Listen. 3 certainties in life, everybody: death, taxes, and the U.S. firing a coach midway through their second cycle. It's just what we do. It's football heritage here for U.S. soccer. Happened to Bob Bradley. Happened to Jurgen Klinsmann. Well, of course, it was going to happen to Gregg Berhalter. We could all see it coming. So, and I'm excited. Thanks for the insight, Paul. It's been good to hear your insight on everything that's going down.
Well, it's good to see you. It's good to see you, Jimmy. And you're right. I mean, this does feel similar to the Bob era in some ways. I think the difference being that Bob got fired after a very entertaining Gold Cup final that, they lost, but that game was a lot of fun, good soccer. It'll be interesting to see now what the U.S. does. What are they going to be looking for, and how quickly do they move this process forward? That is a big one, okay? They waited 6 months before they made the decision to bring Gregg Berhalter back. He got 8 months as the coach. Now they have 2 more months to get a coaching hire in place. Think about if you are going to say Gregg Berhalter was the wrong hire, which is essentially what Matt Crocker is saying here, right? That bringing him back was the wrong decision. We're getting to 14 to 16 months of wasted time, if you want to think of it that way, between the end of the last World Cup and when this new coach who's going to lead them in 2026 takes over. That process has to happen quickly. You have to have a coach in place in time for the friendlies in September, in my opinion, based on what we saw over this last year, basically.
So in saying that, Paul, what are some of the names being thrown around? Because I'm in the camp of, if a big enough candidate has given you maybe word that they are interested in maybe XYZ has to happen. And let's say it's after the transfer window. Would U.S. Soccer wait, or would they rush to just hire somebody that maybe isn't the right guy? Maybe he's the best candidate in of the available candidates that they've interviewed, but maybe it's not the perfect person. And are they looking for a name? Are they looking for someone with the most international experience? Does that matter at all? Do they have to have a little, or is it about accomplishments? So where is U.S. Soccer in this search?
I mean, Matt Crocker just said he wants to hire the best coach, right? So it's a way of not telling us what he really wants to do, right? I mean, let's be honest. I think you brought up a lot of good points. First of all, I think international experience should matter because I don't think you have time for a learning curve for a coach to come in who's used to working at the club level, who hasn't been experienced at the international level. Now, there are some exceptions here. I mean, if you can go get Jurgen Klopp or somebody like that, if that's a
would
realistic...
Would Thomas Tuchel be one of those names?
Well, I don't think you'd want to. Would you bring a coach who's had conflict with your best player, on multiple occasions in to coach the national team?
But who's a good tournament coach? I don't
think you can afford to do it. I've got a name for you guys that I think I would go after number one on my list if I were U.S. Soccer, and it's a name that's got a little bit of controversy around him at home, but the results speak for themselves. If I'm Matt Crocker, I'm waiting till the weekend. I'm waiting for the Euro final, and then I'm calling my old friend Gareth Southgate. Because, first of all, they have familiarity with each other. They work together to create the England DNA at the FA. And if you want to talk about – if you look, at the end of the day, you can say what you want about Gareth Southgate. Here's what we got. Semifinal, final, quarterfinal, and a final in 4 tournaments with England. And let's talk about what England looked like before he took over, because it wasn't that, okay? It wasn't semifinals and finals. I think Gareth Southgate is one of the best choices U.S. Soccer could make. And you want to talk about the expectations of the England team, and they didn't play the prettiest soccer. They're playing for a trophy on the weekend. They're playing for the European Championship. I think he'd be a great hire for U.S. Soccer.
He's got a better roster, Paul. I mean,
all right,
sure.
Before we go any further,
he's like Gregg's evil
Paul
twin.
Tenorio's throwing out a manager that the English fans wanted to throw off the London Bridge. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we can dive deep into that, and then we'll throw out some other names.
Spicing it up before the break.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back to Call It What You Want. Just before the break, Paul Tenorio suggested that U.S. Soccer should look at Gareth Southgate, the most pragmatic, boring manager of all time, that checks the box for results because they're in another final. But in terms of performance and style and getting the most out of these players and putting out, a performance that fans can get behind and be enthusiastic about, not so much. But Tony, Jimmy, what are you guys thinking about that? And do you have any other names that come off the mind?
Well, Jimmy, I don't know about you. I didn't have Gareth Southgate on my bingo card as the manager of this group. Look, I think, Charlie, you and I have had this conversation because we worked this week together. I'm not so enamored by a name. I want the right guy, whoever that is. I want the right guy. And I know people will say, well, I want a foreign coach. I don't want an American. I don't care. I want the guy that's going to lead this team. They got to figure out who the guy is that gets the best out of this team. And I think the number one quality has to be somebody who has complete control of the group. Because I feel like in the end, or towards the end of this period, and really since Gregg's second cycle with this group, it started to feel like to me that this was more a player-run team than it was a manager-run team. And when you do that, sometimes it's good, but sometimes you run into some issues, right? And with a young team, I think it's really, really difficult. Think about the cycle that they're in right now. They don't really know anything else, this group. They don't know anything other than, hey, this is how a national team should be run. I think they need a different view right now because, remember, they came in after 2018, after we didn't qualify for the World Cup, and this is all they know. And in the beginning, because they were a young group, I think, yeah, you have to put your arm around them a little bit. You gotta coddle them sometimes, and things don't go your way, and you're trying to be the group that comes back to the World Cup, but you're still a young group. But I think now these guys are used to a manager that dictates everything that happens throughout the day. And I know we've had discussions off air about, leadership committees and all of this stuff. I say we scrap all of that and we got to go back to somebody who just takes complete control. Everyone's going to have an idea and they're going to have to sell that to Matt Crocker on how they want to play, what this roster looks like, who they'll call in, all of those things. Because every manager that they interview will have all of that stuff. I want the best guy for the group. And again, I don't care what the name is. If he has a name, then perfect, right? He brings a different persona, but it doesn't have to be a name for me. It needs to be the best guy. Look, no one knew Lionel Scaloni until he won a World Cup, unless you played against him, like I was fortunate enough to do. No one knew De La Fuente, right? This is a guy that coached won a 17 and a U20 Euros with Spain. No one knew who he was. Nobody could tell you who he was. In Spain, you could, but around he wasn't a name. He's got his team in the final again. So it's not always about the name. It's about the right guy for the job.
Well,
and then
on the heels
on
of
top
that,
of that, I'll say Nagelsmann was one of those managers who was sacked, and then look at what he did with Germany. So someone who with no international experience, but young.
No,
ahead,
that's fair. I off the back of De La Fuente from Spain, what I do like about his pedigree is that he's a winner, right? He won 2 European championships, no matter the level, and I think that mentality is something I would be looking for. And I actually will disagree with Paul. Not straight up, because I understand that the value of international experience, but I don't think I need that as much as somebody that has the right mentality, which kind of lends itself more to what Tony's saying. I want a serial winner, somebody that knows how to win and wants to win. And if that makes the guys uncomfortable and they're getting challenged and pushed out of their comfort zones, cool, great. That's going to keep them on their toes and get that edge, which is all we were clamoring for before, was the players need to hear a new voice. So yes, did we waste 14 to 16 months? Yeah, it feels like it in some ways since we ultimately made this decision. I don't want to waste any more time. We have 3 friendlies, whether they're great opponents or not. There's still 3 games where a new coach can come in and start to implement their methodology and their ideas about how we want to play. And that's going to be very important. The more time that we waste and draw this out, it's just going to be worse for whoever comes in to try to instill that, because we don't have a lot of meaningful games leading up to 2026. Mm-hmm. So I want someone that's a serial winner. I want somebody that's ready to take the job right away. And I'm very curious about the money. If we have a bottomless pit and we can go find that, then that opens up who we can go chase. But if we're
So,
limited by how much we can spend, or if it's any kind of,
do you have any insight on the budget, limitations, budget, and will Crocker speak to the players? Will the players have any say so this time, or is he like, all right, that was a one-time thing, that's not happening again?
Yeah, great question. First of all, he said, look, we understand that it's a competitive market right now for salaries for coaches, and we have every intention to be competitive in that market. So they're going to spend. They say, look, national teams, senior national teams are important for us, right? And so we are going to put the money down that we need to put down to get a coach. I think if you get to big name coaches that are going to be that next level up of money, that's where you start talking to sponsors and you start opening up opportunities that way. But I don't think finances are really going to be an issue, because I don't think we're going to be going down the list of coaches that are at that like $20 million range. And as far as the players' involvement, Matt Crocker said, I called the leadership council and I let them know that this decision was happening. And it didn't sound like it was a feedback session. It was like, what were those conversations like? I just was letting them know that this is the decision, this is the way. So it feels more like, a little bit more of Matt Crocker exerting his control. And I thought he said, look, I am more confident in myself in this program now than I was the last time around. He's been here longer, right? He's been here for more than a year now. He's worked extensively with both national teams. He said because of that, he feels like he can be much more targeted in this coaching search, move it along quickly, because he feels like he knows what this program needs and exactly what he's looking for. I think that's really important. You cut out kind of the early portions of a process of hiring a coach, right? Identifying all these different things. No, it's identified. I know who I want. I know what I need. I'm going to go get it.
Yeah, I'm curious in terms of the timeline. Is there a hard out? Like, we have to have a coach by X date. I know we have the 3 friendlies, but I look at these friendlies. It's Canada, Panama, and New Zealand. I'm not rushing to make a decision on these 3 matches. If you told me it was Germany, France, Brazil, or Argentina, and you're like, okay, it's a friendly, but these are real tests. Not that Panama just beat us and they're not a real test, and Canada just got to a Copa America semifinal. But
how long are you willing to wait, though, Chuck? How long are you willing to wait?
No.
I'm willing to wait. I'd say until September, but I'm not going to rush before that. If the right candidate comes along and says, "Hey, I need some time. I got to work through some things, but I want to do it." Great. And I brought up this point in terms of a new manager. If you're thinking about one that has experience at the highest level, maybe has won a World Cup, one that has coached in a World Cup to a 3rd place finish, maybe not as a full-time, but as an assistant, and is currently coaching the French Olympic team, who has played in MLS, understands the players, understands all these things. If he, in my mind, if he wins gold, or gets, let's say gold or silver, but gets to that final match with all the expectations in Olympics on home soil.
Did you say Yogi Love? What are you talking about?
I think Thierry Henry vaults himself to the top of the list.
Okay, right, so if Thierry Henry gets to a final, but they don't play beautiful free-flowing soccer, if they just get there in kind of a
you think France isn't going to play beautiful soccer? You think that team isn't going to play?
Does France the Euros play beautiful soccer?
Yeah, jeez.
I mean, what's the last national team that really knocks the ball right? It's like the Spain team that went World Cup Euro is the last national team that really.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if you watch the Euros, how many of these teams that we all have been accustomed to seeing playing beautifully have played beautifully? One, and that was Spain. That's it.
But that's
Germany
why you
at
guys
times,
hate on
but
Southgate.
that's it.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, I feel like the national team movement is let's move. We're not as worried about how pretty it looks, right? It's like let's get results. Like whether you're talking about Deschamps, whether you're talking about England.
Is that bad of me to want both?
No, it's not bad to want both. It might be unrealistic, I don't know.
And this is the thing, like, because if we say, for instance, Jesse Marsch, he had no international experience. Sure, he coached in Europe, but those didn't go really well. Although RB Salzburg, you could say, but I mean, they were 10 times bigger than any other club in Austria, and the roster that he had at the time. But you take that into account, and he gets Germany and Canada to a Copa America semifinal. Mind you, they didn't play beautifully. It was pretty ugly and chaotic, but they got there. I see some people being like, "Oh, Jesse Marsch." I still don't think Jesse Marsch would have been the right hire for the U.S. men's national team if we were talking about them getting the performance part right in a style that's attractive and keeping possession and not playing one
But
one way.
Let's be real though. Like if you go and look at the data from the World Cup in 2022, this U.S. team played better soccer than any U.S. team had before. Like in terms of like the tilt of the field, the number of possessions that ended in the opposing third, the number of times that they won the ball on counters in good spots. Like all of the advanced metrics showed that they played better soccer, certainly than the team in 2014 and the team before.
Sorry,
that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I got to stop you. I got to stop you. That's not true, man.
It is.
No, it's not true. The reason the reason those metrics look the same, because you didn't have metrics in 2002. We didn't have these metrics, or they would have looked exactly the same.
They only played CONCACAF opponents, basically. You throw that in too. They didn't play.
Man,
look at the friendlies that they're playing.
I'm talking about the World Cup, just the World Cup data. And you're right. The data I'm talking about as far as how much better it was that I looked at was over the last 4 World Cups. So 2010, 2014, 2018, 2022. But my point being that we have to figure out exactly what we want from this U.S. team. Do we want this team to be about both playing, expansive soccer and, oh, by the way, winning? And realistically, I think that, but like, it's interesting to me. Like yesterday, I was sitting in the press conference for Argentina, and they also aren't winning these games the prettiest. And they've gotten to this point where it's not about that for them anymore. When you hear Scaloni talking, it's enjoy these moments. We want to give tribute to the teams that lost because they wanted it just as badly as we did. And sometimes you just need a little bit of luck, right? You need the bounces to go your way. You need to slog through a couple games. It's interesting to me how these conversations are changing everywhere, right? In Argentina, in France, in England, in the US. We're not the only program that's looking at this and saying, how do we measure the success of our national team? I think the difference is now we're saying, okay, well, we know for sure that we're not playing pretty and we didn't get results. So we need somebody to come in and start building towards something, right? Like, because we felt like, okay, it's building towards something in 2022. This looks like it has potential, and it doesn't look like that right now. But to your guys' point, I do think it has to be somebody that comes in and inspires this team to play better soccer, to play better than they're playing right now, and the results will come. And I don't know who that's going to be. Is it someone like Patrick Vieira? Is it somebody like, Pochettino? Is it somebody like that? I don't know, but I think certainly you need somebody who's going to come in, as Tony said, and be in charge and be the lead personality of the team and kind of set maybe a new hierarchy in that locker room.
All right. Well, we got to take another break. I want to thank Paul Tenorio, the master of reporting. Thank you for joining us today. When we come back, I know Tony, he's about to blow a lid. You go off, Tony. Paul, I appreciate you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm just glad I was able to get a nice reaction out of Jimmy and Tony. So.
Triggered. # triggered.
Triggered. See you, Paul.
See you guys.
Welcome back to Call It What You Want. We just had Paul Tenorio for a few segments talking about what he's been able to get out of Matt Crocker and U.S. Soccer in terms of letting Gregg Berhalter go and what's next. Tony, you're about to blow a casket. Go ahead. Let loose. I want you. Get it out of your system. Go.
That commercial break really, really helped me.
How many things did you bang around in that studio?
Oh, yeah. I broke your studio, and I had to move into this one.
It looks like you're being interrogated.
Oh, yeah, I am at this point. So let me just rewind because I want to get to something Paul said. But with regards to the coach, I'm trying to simplify it in my mind. I want a coach that's going to maximize the talent we have in this group, because I think that's ultimately the coach's job. Maximize wherever that is. If our team is a 10, then we need to get to a 10. If our team is a 6, well, damn, we better get to a 6. I believe they're better than that, but that's the coach I want, the guy who's going to maximize the talent that we have in this group. And by the way, we're going to see if we have talent in this group. Paul got me with the Matt Crocker said he called the leadership group. And here, for me, lies the problem. Again, I mean, you guys, I imagine, have been on teams where managers were fired, right? Did you get a call from your general manager to tell you what was going on? Did they say, hey, I just want to let you know, I fired you guys? No, like every other. You think who got fired? Ecuadorian coach, right? Was the first one to go in Copa America. Did they call a leadership group? No, all those guys, they picked up the newspaper and the coach was fired. Like, the player's job is still to play. And that's where I get caught up in this thing. I'm like, is that
Tones? Do you think there's something in the conversation there where the players? I don't know if this is an exact correlation, but there is some dialogue around our players being soft. Do you think that falls into that category a little bit, where we have to check in a little bit with their feelings and to make sure everything's okay with the decisions we're making? I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Millions of dollars. They fired Stefano Pioli. They fired Max Allegri. I'm trying to think of the coaches they got fired. But like, do you get a phone call all the time? Like, Jimmy, who cares? And if the narrative, and I hadn't heard, I mean, I kind of feel it. I don't know that the team is soft, but if the narrative is that they're a little bit soft, does that help? Like, does that mean we need to? I don't know the word. We need to harden them a little bit. Like, if that's, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but. Like, do we need to toughen them up? Well, is calling them to let them know that their friend was fired? Like, I don't know how that helps. I don't even know why you would do that. I just don't get it.
Well, I feel like it gives power to the players.
I want to throw out some names to you, Jimmy and Tony.
Okay.
Would you take a Graham Potter?
I guess it would be like, as opposed to who? I mean, I guess I would be.
Let's just say
I'd be interested.
Like, I'm in. I'd like to do this. Would you take it?
No, I'd want to know who else is out. He wouldn't be my first choice. I wouldn't even have him on my top 5. I don't think. But
okay.
But he is available, I guess. Who else you got?
What about Xavi?
Xavi would be interesting. I don't know. I mean, there's also an idea of how the players in our player pool would mesh with the type of ideology that Xavi would bring to the table. I don't know if we have enough players that have been blooded in his the DNA of where he has come from. Even Barcelona, they have so many players that didn't come through La Masia. So you could see at times, I think he struggled with those players that didn't have that type of experience or know-how in terms of the Barcelona DNA, and he'd be inheriting quite a few players that didn't have that, obviously, even though we have some players that could probably hang in that I don't know who else. Xavi's an interesting one.
Yogi Löw.
Yogi Löw's interesting. I kind of want to hear from Tones on this too. Yogi Löw has the experience of international competitions. He also was in a time of transition for Germany when I remember they got knocked out in the 2000 Euros really early on, and they all had an about face like, hey, we got to figure this out. And the Federation and Bundesliga started to work together a little bit on how to make sure that we're developing the German player in a more meaningful way. 14 years later, they win the World Cup, and Yogi Löw is managing them. So there's something about him that he'd be higher up my list than the other two that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, he's a name that's been thrown.
And then, like, guys like Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, he's a name that's been thrown out. The other thing is where are we with did we start to get away with some of these names with tournament experience? Because I'm not completely sold. Like on when people say tournament experience, do they mean World Cup experience? Do they mean Champions League experience? Do they mean Concacaf Champions, whatever we call it now, Concacaf Champions Cup experience? Like these are all tournaments. So what does tournament experience mean, and why is that important? Why is that a criteria for a manager? Would it be nice to have a guy who won the World Cup? Yeah, no doubt about it. But why is that a criteria for everybody? Because at the end of the day, your job is to play game one and win game one. And then your job is to play game two and win game two. Same thing in the league, right? So that's why when we throw these terms around, I get lost a little bit trying to figure out what they all mean.
All right, let's take a break from the coaching stuff really quick and talk about players and our player pool in particular, especially based on how we played leading up to Copa America and Copa America itself. This is the most versatile performance presented by Vuori, a new perspective on performance apparel. So I want to ask you guys, who will be our most versatile player in the future, moving into 2026? Based on what you've seen so far, who do you guys like in that space? Maybe someone that can play multiple positions. I really like how Christian has added some versatility with regard to his leadership and some of the intangibles. So I'm kind of curious as to what you guys think. Chuck, you get to go first.
Yes. It would probably be Anthony Robinson. I just think it shows when he plays consistently week in and week out in the English Premier League. And in terms of metrics, and I know Paul Tenorio was big on metrics, and for me, stats like, yeah, it's a little bit of a trigger to me. I'm starting to understand how you can apply certain, but they're very subjective in how you want to use metrics. You can justify them to go any which way you want, right? But I think for Anthony Robinson, his timing of his runs, I think he's been very consistent with both his defensive presence and tackling, but also getting forward, and his delivery has gotten much better, and the variety of passes that he's able to make. So for me, that's the one player that I've really been high on, and I think he's kind of met the expectations, if not exceeded them in the Premier League. But with the U.S. men's national team, he's definitely at least played to his level.
All right, Tones, what about you?
Yeah, those are the first two names that came to mind. I guess the other one would be Chris Richards, and kind of this ascension over the season, starting as number 6, really being a center back, but he's played left center back when we played 3 in the back. I don't think he had the best Copa America, but I'm looking at his trajectory, and I'm liking where it's going. And I like center backs and goalkeepers in particular that we can think about being sort of 10-year players, like guys that are going to be in the national team for 10 years, and they're going to be the guy that you call in all the time. He could be one of those guys, and this is a really important year for him. So I'll look out for him, Jimmy.
All right, that's a good shout. I am actually going to go with the guy I just mentioned, Christian Pulisic. Not only is he doing it on the field, and what I really appreciate about him is his consistency and how he's been playing. And I think maybe that doesn't fall into versatility as much, but where I think that really comes in is just his ability to lead now. It's very clear that not only is he leading with his verbal comments and whether it's before a game in the huddle, even in the press conferences afterwards, I feel like he's really setting the tone for the team, but also in his actions. I mean, he wants the ball. He wants to put the team on his back. He wants to make plays. He's trying to do it on both sides. I remember when we needed to have a reaction after getting beat by Colombia 5-1, he's out there making tackles against Brazil straight away. Like, we got to make sure that we're setting the tone and sending the message that we aren't soft, that we aren't going to get pushed over, and we are here to play. And I really like that about Christian in particular, and long may that continue, because we're going to need that type of leadership leading into 2026. So that was the most versatile performance presented by Vuori, a new perspective on performance apparel. All right, what else we got, Chuck?
All right.
You want to talk about the Olympics? What else we got?
Yes, but I also want to address, our people in the chat. So I'm going first right here. You did trigger me. Congratulations. Music video uploader 1. Americans overrate the EPL. It's embarrassing. Are you forgetting CBS, what we cover? We got Serie A, or we had Serie A. I don't know, we may have it still. Champions League, Europa League. We value all the European leagues. And we clearly understand that the English Premier League doesn't get you all the championships. You don't win necessarily everything if you play in the English Premier League. It doesn't mean you play the best football either. We get that. I see it every week when we talk on Morning Footy about all the clubs in the world. So to take that comment and put it somewhere else, because you're off on that one. And appreciate everybody here. A lot of great comments. I know we got to get to break, but yeah, we'll talk about the Olympics after this break. See you soon. What you want. Jimmy, I know you weren't here for the opening segment, but I took some time along with Tony to give Gregg his respect, pay our respect to Gregg for taking a inexperienced young, you could say U.S. soccer was dysfunctional at that time because of all of the hatred towards not qualifying for the World Cup in 2018. And he took this young, inexperienced group with a lot of potential, got them through World Cup qualifying, won Nations League, a Gold Cup, and then out of the group in the World Cup. And I think people need to respect that. And also think about, we wouldn't be in the position we are today if it wasn't for what he was able to do over that first cycle. So we should be grateful for that. Plus, he's a World Cup. He's a national team guy. So I think people should pay their respect in that manner.
I 100% agree. I want to thank Gregg for what he's done and for all the things that you mentioned. I think in some ways he maybe will look back and reflect on, maybe I should have got out after the first cycle. He was a hot commodity. He did a good job. We had the youngest team at the World Cup, and he got us out of the group, and we went toe-to-toe with the Dutch, who were just better than us on that day. Sure, he could have done a lot of things different. I'm sure he's reflected upon that quite a bit. And I think there was some hype around him, like, hey, this is a guy that's on the up and up. He can do a lot with a young team. And now he has a different reputation because he stuck around a little bit and things just didn't grow. And now he's going to have to work through that part of his development as a coach, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from what he's done. I thought that, to your point, excellent in terms of transitioning an older team that didn't qualify for 2018 and then inheriting a lot of young players and getting them all to buy in and creating an incredible team culture that's still very strong and vibrant right now. And he needs to be credited for that. So yeah, I do want to thank him for that, but I think he just stayed on a little bit too long. And I know it's hard when you're in that position, it's going to be hard to let go. I mean, there's a lot of ego attached to that as well. And always trusting and thinking that you're the guy. If you didn't have that belief, then I wouldn't want him as coach either. So I'm very curious and to see where he ends up. And I hope he has a successful career, after he moves on to whatever's next. But yeah, it's time for somebody else to get a shot at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, facts. I think we're going to be welcoming in somebody who knows him very well. And drum roll,
I can't wait.
Please.
Hey!
Oh,
wow.
Mike Grella, welcome.
What's going on?
Ooh,
Yeah,
getting
you guys
drinks
back
first.
before guy to death, and now you're saying, "Oh, thank you for everything."
It's called balance, Grella. It's called balance, you know?
No. Listen, I think knowing Gregg, the reality is if you sat down with him and asked him, "Hey, what would you grade yourself? Are you happy with what's gone on? Are you happy with the results? Are you happy with the stamp you left?" I think you would be disappointed with the way things turned out. I don't know if he would say, "Look, it was my fault entirely." I think he would have some interesting answers, but I think he wouldn't be 100% proud of or 100% satisfied with the sort of from start to finish what it was in the end. I think he has very high expectations. He had really high standards, high ideas for what he wanted, and I don't think anyone could look at it and be like really excited or really happy with the bottom line at the end.
I'm interested in a couple of things that you said there. For me, the results speak for themselves, and that's the first thing that you're judged upon it. The coach. The second part is the performance thing. In the end, a lot of the national team, because you don't get to work with them every single day, it was hard to bring it into fruition, because these guys are all different stages. Some guys are fit, some guys are playing, some guys are not. You're dealing with a lot of egos and different perspectives. So I think from that standpoint, it's always difficult coming in for your first international experience. What would you say were his biggest successes, and what would say are some of the biggest disappointments?
I think you guys say it. I think at the end of the day, he came into a situation that was not very good, that was not very clean, that was all over the place. And there was a lot of excitement for his hire, for the people that did their research and found out who Gregg was and where he managed. And if you heard all the managers that would speak about him, I mean, some really good managers, I mentioned this before, but Tata Martino, I was there when we played a friendly against Atlanta in preseason, and some of the things he said to him and some of the things he said in the media about Gregg afterwards, the mutual respect there for the way he was able to read the game, play the game, make the game. I think he was one of my only managers in my career, and I've had way too many because I've been kicked off of 12 or 13. I've been part of 12 or 13 different teams. And he was one of the only managers that at halftime could look at something, make a change, and make the game better. So I think there is a lot of good. Obviously he's won things as well, right? So he did leave a little bit of a stamp and of a direction of the way he wanted to play. Right. I think he was also an American coach that played in the system that, again, we were really excited to have. Now, where it went bad was obviously where he doesn't have the job indefinitely and they're actively searching for better options. They can't find one and they go back to him. I think that was the beginning of the end. And then all that stuff comes out, which is totally unnecessary. And obviously, hopefully it's all swept behind now and under the carpet. But that's when it, for me, was just didn't look right, didn't feel right. And then the nail in the coffin was this Copa America result. I mean, no question about it. It was the Panama game where they didn't get 3 points. It was always going to be difficult against a Uruguay side that just doesn't give an inch. And ultimately, that was the nail in the coffin for Gregg. But I think it was shaky once he didn't have the job and they were basically looking for other options. I think from there on out, it was never going to really work.
I'm getting hacked apparently because my internet is really slow. So thanks for everybody shouting me out. Kelly Broderick, free Charlie. Yeah, I need to be freed. Go ahead, Jimmy. Take it from here.
No, well, Grella, I wanted to ask you a question with regard to what Berhalter does now. I actually saw some early links to him going to Atlanta United. Do you think he immediately goes to take a job? Do you think he takes a little bit of time and reassesses his life and what he wants to do? I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts.
I think it's totally personal. So some people deal with it in different ways. Some people want the challenge right away. Some people don't. I think with Gregg, and I said this earlier as well, for me, he didn't do the best job with the national team. I think a change was time. I think it was the correct decision. But at the end of the day, it remains the fact that he's one of the top managers in this country. The way he looks at the game, the way he the way he does trainings, the way he pays so much attention to detail, and then on a human level, he's a really good guy. Keeps in touch with his former players. He cares about people. He knows everyone's names. He knows their families' names. This is a top guy. This is a top manager. He, like I said, is the only manager that can look at a game and tactically and is really, really at a high level. So if he wants to take the Atlanta job,
are you trying to be on his staff, Grella?
What's that?
Yeah, what's going on here? Are you trying to make
You
moves?
trying to get on that Atlanta staff?
Because
To get on that Atlanta staff?
Yeah. No, well, what I'm seeing is like a lot of, and I'm one of them saying, look, it wasn't good enough, time for a change. I get it. I understand all that. But I think a lot of neutral fans or a lot of sort of casual fans don't really know what this guy is like behind scenes, what he's like to work with on a daily, on the daily. So I think he'll have plenty of options. Whether he jumps into one right away or not, we'll see. But wherever he goes, he's going to do a good job. And I think he'll probably look forward to being at a club level where he can be with the guys every single day, because he likes to have that level of control, that level of detail in the way he wants to play. And I think he's more comfortable in that situation. And we've seen that across the board. We've seen managers that are good at the international level, and then we see managers that are good at the club level. I think he's probably one of those that is better at the club level.
All right. Mike Grella, we appreciate you. That's some good insight, because none of us got to play with Gregg Berhalter. I got to play with him,
really
not
good
coached
insight.
by him.
And now we know you want to join his staff as well, so it's good.
Yeah, you never know, man. You never know when your last payday is coming.
Well, we know some
right,
people that might control your last payday, so we'll have to put in a good word for you.
Hey, Jimmy, love watching you, man. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. And I love you scoring bangers at TST. Let's keep that up for next year, huh?
I had my eyes closed, man.
All right, we got to take a quick break.
Awesome. All right, we're going to take our next break. Let's take a quick break. Go, Chuck. You got it.
Go. You got it. I'm getting hacked.
You are getting hacked. All right, we're going to take our last break and call what you want. When we come back, we'll see if Chuck still has internet. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back in to Call What You Want. I'm Jimmy alongside Chuck and Big Tones. And we want to give a shout out to Mike Grella for hopping on and giving us his insights, which I think is very valuable to have someone that's played for Gregg as a coach, or as a player, I should say. But let's talk about Canada, the farthest team, or the Concacaf team that went the farthest in the Copa América. Big Tones, I'm going to come to you first. Does this mean now that Canada's kings of Concacaf? Is that how this game works? I'm not sure how this goes.
You're coming to me first on this?
Sure.
Yeah, I suppose it does, right? Right now, I mean, they're the team that got the furthest, so you got to give them their credit. Good on Jesse Marsh for getting the job done. We were talking today on Morning Footy about where this kind of fits in for Canada. I think this is massive for them. This is massive for them in a tournament like this. So at the moment, Canada is the king of CONCACAF.
All right, we're going to sign off on the Golazo Network. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We're going to keep it going on the YouTube, though, if you want to come over and hang out there with us. But yes, keep the Golazo Network going. Just keep it running 24/7. Or I guess we might still be going. So if we're still going on Golazo Network, still going on YouTube, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us on Call It What You Want. Chuck, same question to you. Where does Canada rank now? If you had to say who were the tops of CONCACAF, Is it Canada, US, Mexico? Is it US, Canada, Mexico? Is it Mexico just last and it doesn't matter who's on top of them?
US are still 1, Canada 2, and then Mexico, Panama can fight it out for 3 and 4. But Canada had a favorable path to a semifinal. Let's also put that in perspective. They didn't have to play Uruguay and Colombia and Brazil, right? So I give Jesse a lot of credit from taking that Canada side that was kind of in a difficult spot once John Herdman left and the federation was in a difficult spot. It took the 3 MLS Canadian teams to come into the picture and pay his salary, right? So he comes in and he just gives them hope, right? And it's not the most attractive style. They leave themselves open and they're vulnerable, but how many goals did they score from open play, right? So not the most inspiring performance in terms of getting the most out of your players, because I still think that Jonathan David and Kyle Larin are playing them together is not the way forward. Especially Jonathan David, you saw just didn't look sharp in front of goal, and I think that's due to having to drop so deep and try and create when his strength is in the box and finishing. So given that, congrats to Jesse Marsch and getting Canada to a semifinal, because that's massive for them and for their program. A lot to look forward to in the future, and he has a lot of work to do, but they're not better than us. Like I'm sorry.
No, I guess the best way to what players on Canada would we take on the US? Alphonso Davies. I think Jonathan David would be in the conversation as well. Tajon Buchanan, when he's healthy and full of confidence, I think would be in the conversation as well. And then outside of that, I'm not so sure. Those are kind of the ones that just jump out, but I think that's the best way to look at it. I think you got to
throw in Maxime
more of our
too.
players. We would take care.
You
got to throw in Maxime.
Crepeau was very good. You're right. Crepeau would be another one.
He had a really good tournament. And I guess based on the tournament, Schaffelberg, you take him as a substitute, a guy coming off the bench that could run at the fences late in games. But yeah, you know what? I'd take Kone on our team. I think he's got a massive, massive upside. Watched him in Montreal, covered him, and watching him now go to Europe, I think he's got a big upside.
Yeah,
I
agree
it's going to be
with you on
interesting to see. Yeah, no, I love Kone as well, and he didn't start there for a game or two, so I'm curious what was happening behind the scenes. Maybe Jesse can come on after the tournament and give us some insight. That's he said he would, so we'll see if he'll follow up and walk that talk. All right, let's go circle back to the U.S. men's national team and just talk about the team and just the program and our next steps. Now, Chuck, you had already mentioned that you want to take some time to make sure we get the right person, but I also think it's important that we get the right person in before the 3 friendlies in September.
But Jimmy, what the right person?
That gives us 6 weeks to hire somebody.
Right, I know, but I'm saying the right person. It's so complex, because the right person now doesn't mean that's the right person in 1 month, and that doesn't mean it's the right person in 2 months, and it doesn't mean that's the right person for this team, right? So, what in your mind does the coach have to be available now, or could this be a time to go out and kind of put some feelers out there for coaches who already have leave that job, and what's realistic? Because obviously, Jurgen Klopp would be an amazing coach to come in and try and turn this around in 18 months. But is that realistic? What have you heard, and what are your thoughts towards that whole process?
Well, yeah, I actually want to talk to Tones about this too, because he's mentioned the right person, and so what are those qualities that we're looking for? For me, as I mentioned before, I want someone that has a winning mentality, that has a track record of winning, that has that in their DNA and demands that of their players every time they step on the field. And that might make some of our players that are currently in the pool that play regularly a little bit uncomfortable, that they have to also compete for their spot, game in and game out every time they wear the red, white, and blue. So there's that element I want. And having some international experience, I think, would be helpful, because a tournament format is much different than just being a club manager. And obviously there are outside tournaments, cup competitions, and Champions Leagues and all that type of stuff. 60
more minutes of AOL online.
But I ultimately, I in terms of a right person, it's interesting. It is complex. I don't think it's straightforward. And to what Tony was saying before, it's finding that person who can challenge the group and still continue the culture that they have, the strong culture that they have, and ultimately get the most out of them. I love what Tone said before. If our team is currently rated a 6, how can we get them to, just to start, get them to an 8? And once we get good at being consistently good as an 8, how do we get them up to a 10? Or how can we have them match teams that when they play at a 10, we can also play at a 10? And how adaptive and fluid can we be in game? Because I don't think we do a very good job of managing the game. And I don't think we've done that consistently under Gregg Berhalter. Did we do it at times? We did, but it wasn't there consistently. And when we needed it the most, against Panama recently in the Copa América, in the round of 16 against the Dutch, where they asked questions and we didn't have answers. And that is what I want to get over, that part of that game, that frustration that I have, that I see from our team on not to say a regular basis, but that we lack that consistency. So Tones, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on what that right manager looks like for you.
Yeah, you framed it nicely about it's about getting the best out of players. I'm just kind of writing down names throughout the day. One just came to mind, and I'm just writing down names. I'm going to throw it out there. Edin Terzic, right? Attacking style at Dortmund, leaves. He's been a Dortmund guy forever. He said he was looking for a new project. Stefano Pioli just left. I love the way he set things up in Milan over the last couple of years. Won a Scudetto. Could you throw his name into the mix?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, Pochettino's out there. Max Allegri's out there. Like, these are big names that have also coached. Sergio Conceição.
So Gio Reyna's got to go. if Terzic comes in, Gio's not playing.
Well, same thing with Tuchel and Pulisic,
Yeah, so I mean, not every guy is going to satisfy every single player, but again, this has to be the guy that takes over for me. The guy that and again, Pellegrino Matarazzo. He's out there. He's got connections here. I don't know. You can look at his success or lack of in some instances, and David Wagner. Like, you can look at some successful moments, some not so successful. I mean, I'm not endorsing any one person. I put Thierry Henry with the caveat that he has a good Olympics. Charlie, you and I talked about this yesterday or the day before. So again, I'm just building a list in my head for people to think about. But again, gonna have to go through an interview process. I'm curious. Will we do this testing with all of these coaches? Like, this was so big, this 2-day test. Like, if you want to bring Mauricio Pochettino, I don't care if you want to bring a guy like that, or Jurgen Klopp. Everyone wants Jurgen Klopp. You want to bring Jurgen Klopp in, and you're going to tell him he's going to have to do 2 days of testing?
He has to do the PowerPoint.
He's not doing testing. No, exactly. You don't do testing with that. I mean, you know what he can do, and that's a guy's a serial winner. I think he can motivate the group. There's a lot about his characteristics that I like.
You got to sit down and do it. You got to test him. What's his knowledge of the game?
Come on, Chuck. He would just have that big grin, like, why am I doing this? So
Jimmy, so in all seriousness, right? So you're already breaking the mold that you said was the way to hire a coach. Not you in particular. I'm talking about you.
No, Matt Crocker. Sure.
You're already breaking the mold of how you said 14 months ago. This is how you hire. We hired a group from Ireland, I believe Sportsology is from, right? At least one of their offices is there. We hired a group to come here and put this all together for us and paid the money to do this, and now we're going to throw it out?
Yeah, we should throw it out 100%.
I'm with you 100%. But is that what they're going to do?
Well, they shouldn't do that. This is bigger than that. I understand. And Tab Ramos, we talked about his quote. Like, there's a time and place to potentially have those types of hires and to put them through that process. Jurgen Klopp doesn't need to go through that process. We're just trying to get the biggest name that has a ton of experience, that ticks most of the boxes that we need. The only thing that he lacks is international experience, which I think wouldn't be that big of an issue. And got to motivate the guys to win games when it matters. That's what we're looking for. Win games when it matters. And they've got an 18-month to 2-year run-up to make that happen. And they're going to have friendlies and games and opponents that aren't going to challenge our group as much as we would like. So they're going to have to fill that void in some capacity too. So that has to be taken into consideration. And that's the stuff I would interview them about. Hey, Jurgen Klopp, by the way, we can't get you any friendlies against big opponents because of the Nations League and all the other crap competitions that are out there that are limiting our opportunity to do that. How do we fill that in? How do you make us competitive going into the biggest tournament that we will ever host potentially in recent history, because we did it in 94, and it was a big boon to growing the sport here and just making it bigger and bigger and bigger. We need someone that can continue to build off of that, stand on the shoulders of everybody else that have done it before us, and continue to push us in the right direction. I don't care about any of the other stuff. That would be my number one question. How do you make us competitive despite not having a lot of competitive games? That would be one of my number ones. I don't know what question you guys would ask in the interview process, but I'm curious.
Well, that's it. What do you think of our roster? How do you want to play? What are your principles of playing? Like, these are things, because those have to fit the players that we have. When you look at our roster, do you see any changes you'd make right away? Where would you make those changes? What do you like about the roster? What do you dislike about the roster? What can you do? As you mentioned, in we're going to have 16 months or so, something like that, 18 months, whatever it is. What do you, in this time, like, what's the progression? Where do we want to be? I mean, all these things have to be asked. Where do you sit on dual nationals? Like, are you going to go out and, one thing Brian McBride and Gregg Berhalter,
Ernie Stewart and Greg.
Ernie Stewart, yeah, they did a great job with dual nationals. Is the next group of guys going to come in and do that? Or are they going to care about? Do they have time to do that? Where are we with all of those? So there's a lot of questions to be answered. But yeah, I mean, to your point, what can you do for this group?
And for me to build off of that, I would add, how does he measure or she measure success? What is that for this coach? Do they see this group of players and talent and they say, this is realistic and I can do X, Y, Z with this group? Or is it I have to get at minimum to a quarterfinal in the World Cup on home soil, and I know I could do that at the very, so for me, it's how aggressive are they in terms of their mentality in the international game? Is it better to have, to be at 1-0? Do they sit back? Do they make those changes to defend 1-0 lead, or do they go and they are kind of more aggressive in trying to build on that lead, knowing that the team's playing desperate? So just trying to figure out in their mindset the mentality and how does that fit with this group? How much leeway are they going to give players who are on big clubs who don't play necessarily or play as much versus a young up-and-coming player? How often are they going to be tested and pushed? And how open is he to change formation, tactics from game to game? Is it a consistent thing? So there's a number of questions that I would ask these candidates. And ultimately, I think you get a good feel for who that right guy is after those conversations.
Yeah, those are good. It's a big conversation. And obviously, whoever we hire, you're going to have a big conversation because you want to get that insight from them from a lot of different perspectives.
And then all three of us have to join the staff on top of that.
Well, that goes without saying. That's what Call What You Want is. It's a stepping stone to a national team job, as we saw with Jesse Marsh in particular. Yes. All right, so final thoughts.
There's a chance.
There's a chance. There's always a chance, Big Tones. I'll give it. Let's go one lap. Final thoughts. Tones, I'll come to you first. Obviously, a big day with this breaking news on our emergency podcast here. Gregg Berhalter is out as the U.S. men's national team. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, look, that era is over, and now we're going to start a new one. And we have an opportunity with a clean slate here to find the right guy. I'm hoping that U.S. Soccer does due diligence. I'm okay if they don't rush through this September and October window based on the opponents. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to them. I want the right guy, Jimmy. The guy that's going to get the maximum out of this group. I don't know who it is. I don't know the type of guy they're looking for. And in the end, it doesn't matter to me. I just want the right guy to get this group of players that we think can be successful in 2026 to reach the heights that we think they're able to reach. And good luck to U.S. Soccer in getting that guy.
Yeah, good luck indeed. How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, I think I'm relieved that U.S. Soccer made the right decision for the group, for this country heading into the 2026 World Cup. Now is a time to go out and find a manager, because also nothing's guaranteed, right? There's a risk in every way, whether you're stuck with Greg, whether you're going in, there's always necessary risk was making this decision to go out and find a manager with new ideas who's going to play a different style and implement a different type of pressure on this group to see how they evolve and to see how far they can go. So I think from that standpoint, I'm excited for the future, because now U.S. Soccer has to take care of business and make the necessary hire for this team to advance.
All right. I love both of you guys' comments. I'm excited for the future as well. My final thought, I'm calling it a show. Call what you want is done for now. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Golazo Network, on our YouTube channel. Keep supporting us at Golazo America. We appreciate you. And we'll see you very, very soon. There's going to be plenty to talk about with this team moving forward. Thanks for hanging out with us.
I'm going to get off AOL now and stop mining crypto, and I'll be back later, guys. See you tomorrow on Morning Footy.
See you, Chuck. See you, Toads.
We're still live.